Semi-automatic, low capacity, high recoil, audibly distinct, blows things up. We already covered the Rytec AMR 2 years ago, so here's the NA-45 instead. Introduced in mobile's first anniversary along with the Fennec, the NA-45 is one of the strangest weapons in the COD franchise. It and the HBR-A3 are the only guns in mobile that are specifically from Advanced Warfare. It's essentially a 2-round semi-auto sniper that shoots C4s. The real-life version is the EDM Arms Windrunner, a bolt-action precision rifle designed by Bill Ritchie in the 90s to be very quick to disassemble. If it looks familiar, you would be correct. Intended to bridge the gap between 338 Lapua Magnum and 50 BMG, an XM variant optimized for extreme long ranges became the M200 by Cheyenne Tactical. Distinguished by its underbarrel carry handle, the CheyTac Intervention is ironically best known as a fan-favorite quickscoper in Call of Duty. The Mini Windrunner was chambered in the smaller 308 Winchester and 223 Remington. Nemesis Arms took the multi-caliber concept of the Mini and expanded it. Bill Ritchie passed away in 2016 and EDM ceased. Newer versions of the rifles continue to be manufactured by Thor and Vigilance Arms, the latter run by Ritchie's son. Back to mobile. Base damage per shot is moderate, but for a sniper it's the lowest as it deals a flat 30 damage at all ranges. It also has no penetration. The fire rate is 240 rounds per minute. That is 1/3 the speed of the NA-45 in Advanced Warfare. The chest is 10% extra damage, but this doesn't make much of a difference and isn't easily accessible. Because explosions don't count as long shots, you have to rely on one-shot kills, which can only be done normally with headshots. Thus, it's gained a reputation for being one of the most tedious weapons to grind gold on. The explosions themselves deal a maximum of 120 damage as per the training dummy, and this is lethal within 1.5 meters of the blast radius, according to the heartbeat sensor. The total blast radius is 3.5 meters, with a minimum damage of 55 or 56. The highlighted detonation range is 3 meters. If you're worried about blowing yourself up, you can afford to be less cautious as you receive reduced damage from these explosions. If these explosives take any damage from a bullet, fire, explosions, or an EMP, it will detonate. Flak jacket reduces blast damage by 35%, and such users can survive a point-blank explosion. Therefore, you'll actually have to stick them and set them off before they heal. Otherwise, a blast amplified 40% by Demo Expert can kill Flak Jacket users. On enemies without Flak Jacket, Demo Expert extends the lethal radius to 2.8 meters, or roughly 3.5 times more area. While it's normal to expect Flak Jacket to reduce damage taken from your own explosions, Demo Expert on the NA doesn't do extra damage to oneself. Like pistols, the NA has access to trigger attachments. Light trigger increases the fire rate to 267 rounds per minute. However, this comes with more noticeable recoil. Heavy trigger does the opposite, but isn't recommended because your fire rate is noticeably slower at 200 rounds per minute. This is half the speed of the Ravager variant in Advanced Warfare. In terms of mobility, the movement speeds are generally below average for a sniper. The base ADS time is generally average for a sniper. It's poetically appropriate that its fastest ADS is tied with the DLQ's fastest, but this isn't recommended due to its recoil. The sprint out is what you'd expect from a sniper. Very slow to play aggressively unless you know how to slide cancel or jump. Doing so is risky as the base mag size is only 2, and there's no way to increase it. Thus you'll have to reload often. The full reload animation takes 2 seconds with or without spare ammo. When empty, the opportunity to reload cancel is so late that it's not practical. It's also incorrectly stated as 1.5 seconds in the comparison page. With the spare round, the reload cancel is correctly stated but you have to wait a couple frames after you take your thumb off the mag release. Since you'll be relying on that second shot to set it off, it's not that relevant, so you may want to use sleight of hand. The first ammo conversion is electromagnetic. In exchange for slower reloading and movement, the detonation radius is extended from 3 meters to 3.5, or equal to the blast radius. Aside from that, the lethality and range is the same as base. This mag is only useful for hipfiring at the ground or using an EMP to set it off through walls. Unfortunately, I didn't have gameplay with the latter. For even slower movement, fragment rounds increase your blast radius from 3.5 to 3.9. However, your lethal radius is still at most less than 1.6. With Demo Expert, your lethality is extended to 3 meters, or equal to the highlighted detonation range. The final option is High Explosive, which increases the NA's blast damage by 10%. This extends its lethal radius from 1.5 to 1.8. You would think that combining this with Demo Expert for 50% extra damage may seem impressive. But this lethal radius is still only 2.8, or equal to the base with Demo Expert. So it's up to you if you want to maximize its minimum damage. As for accuracy, the NA has one of the steadiest idle sways in this game. The only snipers that I've covered so far that have less sway are the Tundra, HDR, and Rytec. If you use a speed build, then the sway is on par with the ZRG's speed build, base XPR, and base SKS. Recoil is high, much more than it was in Advanced Warfare, and especially if you use the light trigger or build for ADS speed. Like in AW, it helps to secure high ground and aim at a downward angle to brace for recoil. Usually, I don't recommend hipfiring with snipers. The NA-45 is the one exception, as you only have to look at the ground. Base flinch is very high and on par with the Arctic 50 and SPR. With a speed build, its max flinch is on par with the SPR as the 6th worst in the game. Back in Advanced Warfare, the NA-45 had a reputation for being arguably the worst gun in that game, save for some specific variants. Regardless of how you may feel about snipers that can't versus those that quickscope, sniping becomes much more difficult when you have to factor in fast-paced vertical movement, a la jetpacks. The NA's fast fire rate and low recoil were supposed to account for this, but the strange mechanics ended up being counterintuitive. Unlike AW, COD Mobile is boots on the ground. The devs knew that it was going to be a problem. They nerfed its blast damage halfway through the season it was introduced, and added high explosive ammo to compensate. This potential wouldn't be fully realized a couple seasons later because the large cal HVK and Akimbo Fennec were that overpowered. Generally speaking, fast firing semi-autos aren't easy to use with thumbs only. For the NA, precision isn't necessary. No other weapon could ever be as oppressive at anchoring choke points. This was especially problematic during this time, as movement speeds were slower than what we're used to now. Even if you got close enough, SMGs weren't lethal enough to stop NA users from hipfiring the ground or switching to Akimbo Deagles. It wasn't quite number 1 as it had to share the spotlight with the stopping power Arctic 50 with its full body one-shot kill, the DOQ, and Locust. Early 2021 nerfed blank scoping, but as a 2-shot semi-auto, this didn't matter to the NA-45. Even after SMGs sped up the pace of the game, the NA continued to be a menace. Eventually enough was enough. In Season 4, the NA-45 was finally nerfed into obscurity, and has never been relevant since. Flinch on snipers and marksmen were toned down, and Iron Lungs was added, but that was the least of the NA's issues. To add insult to injury, the devs decided to beat this dead horse the following year. The NA got unnecessary nerfs to its blast radius and fire rate. This was the last time the NA was directly mentioned in a patch note. All snipers gained access to Disable 2, but the NA can't afford to sacrifice other attachments to use due to all of its nerfs. Scopelet was added later that year and made hardscopers more noticeable from long range. Halfway through 2023, its performance was optimized. The following season introduced bullet impact as a second factor to flinch. Flinch is not a concern for bolt-action quickscopers as it doesn't take effect until they're fully ADS. But for semi-auto snipers that require a follow-up shot, they are put at a disadvantage against LMGs, heavy ARs, slower SMGs, and faster semi-auto marksman rifles. A couple of seasons later, Demo Expert was buffed to deal 40% extra blast damage. Fast forward to 2025, wildcards were added to the game. On one end, more people than ever are using Flak Jacket due to perk greed, possibly even more because Martyrdom will be buffed. So using Demo Expert is absolutely necessary. On the other hand, Overkill has made it so that there is less pressure for individual weapons to be as well-rounded as possible. It doesn't matter if the NA-45 is terrible, it just has to be better than some pistols. It may even have potential as an anti-melee backup. Previously, headshots and playing hardcore were your only reliable methods of getting long shots. Overkill allows you to use another sniper to shoot enemies in the legs, before switching back to the NA to finish them. So, what are my thoughts on the NA-45? Some may say that it's toxic, but that's just their undiagnosed trauma. I would say that it's arguably the worst primary, but the less seriously you play with it, the more fun it is. Particularly for limited time playlists with jetpacks or cranked. Still, it requires specific setups for theoretical choke niches, whether it be to troll people in S&D by EMPing them through walls, spiting melee users, or tagging enemies to gain wall hacks on specific players. So, how does the NA compare to its very few peers? The only other explosive sniper is the Rytec AMR. The NA has undoubtedly more dangerous explosions, as it actually has a lethal radius. It may deal more damage to its user, but the Rytec's explosions are more of a threat to its user than enemies. The NA has a faster fire rate, but usually needs both rounds in a mag to kill, whereas the Rytec has 5 rounds a mag. The Rytec is just an easier and simpler weapon to use due to its one-shot damage, and it's usable without Demo Expert. A more interesting comparison would be with the Thumper and M4's underbarrel launcher. I'm including both because they have the same damage stats, but I might compare them separately in their own video. The Thumper has more dangerous explosions to both enemies and you, but between the two of them, the NA-45 is more lethal with Demo Expert. As a primary, the NA has more reserve ammo. As a secondary, the Thumper has faster swap times. There's not really a point in having these two compete, as you can use both. As it stands, the NA-45 cannot be allowed to become a good gun without fundamentally breaking the formula for boots on the ground Call of Duty. Instead, I would like to add signature attachments to make it more fun, or at the very least less miserable. One thing I'll give BR credit for is the fact that the base damage of the second round registers on enemies already struck by the first. Does this ultimately matter? No, but I find it strange that this isn't the case in multiplayer. Second, the NA had iron sights in Advanced Warfare as an attachment, so why not? The first signature attachment is a new trigger as an underbarrel. It could be a dual trigger, a reference to Infinite Warfare's Widowmaker, or a binary trigger. The execution may vary, but the goal is to make it a single shot weapon that's easier to use. The caveats are slower reloading, which you can't cancel, a lot more recoil, and reduced blast damage. I never understood why the DLQ got concussion rounds when the NA-45 already shoots grenades, so I suggest giving it sticky grenade rounds. If you give it the same stats as those from the crossbow, long shots become grindable without needing shenanigans. Other than that, it's a 2-shot weapon regardless of Flak Jacket. And last but not least, the NA has no shortage of variants from Advanced Warfare that could serve as cosmetics for a strongbox. But hey, that's just my opinion. This has been a Casual's quick guide. Feel free to suggest what weapons you want to see covered next. My name is On, and I'm off.